It's story time. 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 All right, we are back for another episode of A Journey Through PEI, episode number 18, mofos. Episode 18, crazy. But this is a pinnacle moment in my artistic style evolution. This was the moment where I feel like I actually had the opportunity to evolve. And that also involved letting go of this journey I was on and allowing the invitation for a new journey. And that's why this piece I titled Portal, because it was a doorway into that new realm of thought, that new realm of expression, that new space to walk into with everything that I had to bring to the table from where I came from. But to walk through this portal took 2 years of my life to step from one realm into what I didn't even know at the time could be another realm. I was just taking the action with an intention, living my life on the sidelines, of course, working, relationships, family, friends, festing, all that, all the drama in between, you know, all the nitty-gritty stuff. But as I was living my life, I was spiritually, better word, creatively, I was stepping into a new space from the inside out. And I really didn't know what was in store, but again, it was intentional. I had this intent into what I wanted to step into, who I wanted to be, who I wanted to allow myself to be. And before we talk too deeply about this piece, I wanted to break the ice again with a random question. The question that I got for this episode was, what bends your mind every time you think about it? Whether you believe it or not, in one way, shape, or form, I feel like the idea of the Big Bang is how this all started. Whether to you the Big Bang is God creating, or the Big Bang is a cataclysmic atomic eruption in the midst of a space that had nothing but pure density at one finite point. But regardless, gotta get my fruit snacks. Regardless that Big Bang, when I think about that as a concept, it bends my mind. Because technically, the Big Bang is still happening. If you were to think along the lines of time not existing and that it's all relative, in a bird's eye view of the moment of the universe that we know of, or know so little of, erupting into what we know to what we perceive as now, is maybe a split second to something that could observe it all at once. So in that split second where everything is bursting, almost like a firework going off, we, even as I talk right now into this microphone for the sake of this obscure YouTube series where I'm trying to figure out where I am, I know that I am part of the eruption. I am part of that explosion. I am part of that entropy that the universe is going through. I don't know what stage of that eruption I am a part of, but I know it's happening. It's not billions or trillions of years in the past. It's right now. And that's kind of mind-bending, but also inspiring. Like, it makes you want to be explosive. It makes you want to be energetic. It makes you want to be in the moment for whatever the universe has in store for you as part of its structural eruption. And to know, and this is to anyone that's creative, to know that your creative force is part of the universe exploring itself via expansion, it's honorable. It's intimidating, but it's exciting. And I think a lot of the time I try to tap into that thought process when I create. Like, for example, in this piece or any of the pieces, I go in with an intent. That's this concept. It's a finite point. And then once I crack the egg of that intent, it erupts into a array of growth. Or cracks, or like this porcelain growth where it's, and then it becomes this whole world of interpretation, which is what existence is, but it's still holding this one intent. And the thing that really bends my mind the most is, if the universe imitates art and art imitates the universe, in respect to what I said earlier, what is the universe's intent? What led the universe to crack and release its energy in such an expressive way? And also, and I won't go into the deep end with this, what was the universe bringing from its past, if that exists, into that intention? Why was that the intention? Because, like any artist, there is something that came before what they're working on in the moment. Like, we went through this journey from piece to piece to piece in chronological order, and all of that intention led me to this one eruption. But also, if time doesn't exist, are all of these eruptions parallel, like parallel universes? Is it a metaphysical, universally connected expression that's all entwined but not divided by a timeline? Or are there stages of development? Is our universe just one layer of our creator, for lack of a better words, our creator's artistic intent? Or is this, like, for me, is this really experimental and exploratory and hopes to learn more about what it means to be this and how to attain some level of grace with this? So yeah, mind-bending. Now, to serve as a comma between this clause and the following is my last art pun before we enter the Peillustration exploration. And it goes like this, and I feel like it's appropriate. What time do artists wake up? At the crack of dawn. Because I feel like I'm waking up to myself through drawing, and I wasn't awake until I entered this new space through drawing, and here I am, like making full circle with that little joyous pun as a part of shaking off the alarm of waking up. Okay, cool. Let's talk. We are at the portal, but where did we come from? What led me to this doorway? And why does that matter? Or does it even matter? What we saw prior was my effort to accumulate all of the lessons I had learned about balance and identity and self-expression and value and fragility and intention, and sum that all up into one form that is purely a state of being, a dom. Not a dominator, but a dom. To be something like a king dom. So once I completed that last piece, I felt like I saw at least what I consider to be the most accurate reflection of what it meant to me to be myself. And with that awareness of who I was, or who I at least wanted to be, or who I felt like I recognized, my next thought was, okay, so where do this I that I recognize now, where do I go? Where do I take this? And why do I move in that direction? Once you find who you are, it's only natural to then ask where you go, or why you stand there, and why should you or shouldn't you be over there. But it was before I could move, I felt like paralyzed in my creative life. As much as I was moving and grooving, I felt paralyzed in my creative life. And it was because I was stuck in my own head in hopes to find the boundaries, or lack thereof, or the shell, or the cocoon of myself, so that I can hit that wall and come back around, or make full circle through a space that doesn't have walls and come back to the point of self. And then, it felt right to then want to know where I should go, or what did I really value? What did I want to fill that self with? Now that I knew my vessel, now that I knew the medium of which the self is, now that I knew what that could carry, the expanse of it, the volume of it, the strength of it, and it made me visualize this ship, like thinking about the term vessel made me think of a vessel that would sail the seas, and that my mind is but not even the helm, but the starboard of this vessel. As we saw in the previous piece, it was really only shoulders up, which was the mind, that awareness. But it didn't show much of what the body was. And in order to get somewhere, you need to have some control over your body, your vessel that carries the intention that you find in your heart and mind space. And even in the last piece, it was only half the heart. It was half-hearted. It could only be half a heart if it was so identified by the mind. The mind kind of holds half the heart. The mind can kind of prevent you from fully committing into what is truly your path, as corny as that sounds. But yeah, I wanted to build a symbol that could represent my body, a body of work that could lead me somewhere, anywhere, somewhere that I could be comfortable, somewhere where I could also be challenged and see the extent in which the strength that I had constructively, like my build. What type of waters is my vessel built for, and can I learn from that, adjust, rebuild? What would the shape of my vessel be? What mechanism would take it somewhere else? What powers my vessel? What would carry it? And in the last piece, to symbolize my shoulders, which I felt for the longest time had two chips on either shoulder. You don't have just one. I feel like most artists have both shoulders chipped. They were built out of glass, but that glass, if forged correctly, can be very strong. And if your identity with yourself is strong and stable, but also flexible to some degree, it can hold itself true and also hold transparency like glass and honesty with yourself. And that's part of the strength. But below that, I wanted a stronger foundation. I wanted that vessel to be some of the strongest materials that I had access to. Spiritually, emotionally, creatively, all in one technically. And that was my expression, my body of work, my artwork, my portfolio, the things that I have built thus far that define my journey, the things that I have grown into, the things that have grown out to be something I can lean on as a source of reflection. What do I see in the mirror? Not my body, but my body of work. And I can also see more literally my body of work, evidence of what I have done in this life in the posture of my physical, corporeal self, my body. And it was actually this piece that taught me how poorly I was treating my physical body for the sake of my body of work. But I was constructing something internal in order to finally set sail and be comfortable with that vessel, and in that act of setting sail with my sails cast, I can do the self work, do some of the shadow work even, to take care of the body that works so hard to build this vessel. So before I start to explain some of the artwork that I referenced as I built this ship, I wanted to kind of hone in on this one feature that resembles the figure that was in my last piece, Dom, and in the starboard, I believe it's called, where the pilot of the ship holds the reins, the steering wheel of my self's direction. We find that portrait right at the front of the pivot of that steering wheel. Like there's even something beyond this awareness that takes that awareness and turns it left and turns it right. But before I could actually begin to fill this ship and be comfortable with this ship, I kind of had to explore the idea of the body of water, these abstractions, these intentions to experiment and splash every which way in my art and combine things and get fluid with myself. I was interested in actually creating the body of water before I created the ship. I needed to give the ship somewhere to be. For the longest time, all of my focus in my drawings were in a white void, absent of context, which is important for focus, but wasn't going to take me anywhere but in. I wanted to use what was in order to express outwards, so I could actually go somewhere literally and creatively simultaneously. So I started exploring with clay and sculpture, working not in my 2D comfort zone, but finding a way to take that 2D awareness, which I had been working so long to understand myself, and applying that into a more three-dimensional representation of that two-dimensional awareness. And my most feasible and familiar way to access three dimensions in this two-dimensional zone was Millefiori, which is something I observed in my glass community. Even in the glass that I drew for the body in the piece Dom had millies in them. Like the Grim Reaper from the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy was a millie that I had a friend infuse into a glass pendant. And I thought, how about I make pages of millie, of designs that make contact with me, and see what happens to my intent when I explore a physical 3D process with my two-dimensional thoughts. And as a result, I would finish with these circles or squares or even obscure shapes with millies in them, and then I never felt like they were done. I felt like that had to wrap around an idea, almost like instead of you wrapping your mind around something, it was my body that was wrapping around, like my body of work or my body itself that was wrapping around my mind. And for the longest time, I had been representing my mind space through drawing, especially in black and white, for my own reasons that I haven't disclosed exactly yet. But my mind was these drawings. The way I thought, my internal dialogue was drawing. And I took these 3D platforms of clay, still in raw form, pre-baked, and wrapped them around these drawings that I did, covered in glass, and would bake the drawings of things that were relevant in my space at that time while I worked on this. Like I was pulling things from the outside in and building reflections that would be on the surface of this symbolic ocean. It's like you stare at the surface of water while it's choppy and wiggling and wobbling, and you can kind of see infinite energy in that surface, but also see nothing at all. And I kind of wanted to tap into that through reflecting, through drawing what I was seeing and taking it out of context and just plugging it in where it felt right, and wrapping that with these new intents to enter a 3D world that my body can sit in, like the vessel in which my mind can sit in, like a real physical thing in my body of work that my thoughts can fill up. It's kind of like what your body does, is it holds your thought energy and then holds that shape, the shape that perfectly holds your thoughts, and it acts accordingly to those thoughts and how your thoughts inflate and change the trajectory of your formation, and that can create motion. And also, when you stare into these oceanic, is that a word? These liquid, choppy waters, the curls of these shell-type formations resemble the twists and turns of a wavy ocean, because my life has always been choppy and has been crashing upon itself and within itself. But I always know that underneath there is this docile but also very powerful stillness that you can find in the deep, deep oceans. But it's in the deep, deep oceans where there's a true source of that current, or source of the temperament of the water. But also, as part of creating this space that was not void, but I wanted, like, as you can see, there's just black negative space around the edge of this drawing. And I wasn't ready. I sketched in like a shape where I might have wanted a ship before I even decided to do the ocean. Because when I did the ship, I was like, how will the ocean interact with the ship? And then I was like, oh, this is too much. I can't approach this. I can't think straight. I don't know where to start first. And then I started with the things that were around me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to explore the things that are directly around me because I had just moved to Colorado from Florida for various reasons that I won't disclose. And I was like, I had this nice sheet of paper, and I was like, whatever. I just want to draw. I want to tap into my new environment as this self that I'm aware of, and I just want to draw. So I would just tear away from the paper and draw in that space. And then within that sheet of paper, apart from that sheet of paper, I would smash glass and grab my favorite shard of glass, put it over top of whatever I drew, whether it was this geisha or this skull or these herbal flowers, or even Rick from Rick and Morty, or Samurai Jack, or Goku, whichever person or thing I drew, I took the glass that was shattered and reflective, and I put it over top of this thought and framed it in this obscure way that was out of bounds of the square I had been working in for so long, the rectangle I'd been working in for so long, the typical canvas. And I would outline that, cut it out from its shape, merge it with that glass, and then with my new exploration of physical three-dimensional forms and incorporating 2D into that formation, I took what I was seeing and shelled it into a new realm that could assimilate in some way or another and get acquainted with one another within one process where they can merge. And then I would draw that outcome into the space that felt appropriate, front and back. I didn't want to omit any side of this piece. Both the 3D and the thought and intention were very important to this visual in the round. So I drew. I made 3D millies that represented the thing that I was drawing. I wrapped it to combine them, and then drew the result front and back. So I was drawing a drawing the intent of the drawing, and drawing the process of merging. And all of that was coming from the outer bounds of the vessel, myself, and they were being placed as this source of life, which is what water is, this source of life where my vessel can sit and rest upon and find buoyancy with a relationship with this process of observation and interpretation that I have through art of my environment. And that's what this body of water was built out of, this exploration with like ripping pieces of my surroundings and putting it directly around me and understanding the relevance and how I interact. I have lions, One Punch Man, flowers, frogs, the cabbage guy from Avatar: The Last Airbender, tigers, the Chinese lion statues, I forget what they're called, that guard portals. I needed something to be a guard for my portal. Like temple type spaces, avocados. I like the idea of this soft, nutritious surrounding fruity essence wrapped around this hard obstructing but important shell for any future growth. I just liked that. It felt important. And then this turtle that was sitting on top of a rock, the water kind of splashed them onto that rock where they were kind of stuck. And I felt like a lot of the time I felt that way in my life. Adventure time. But yeah. So everything you see, all the tears that came from what was this rectangle is now the space that built the body of water. And it's a body of work that built the body of water. Oh, these birds and everything, like little swans too, 2 swans together. I was in a new relationship at the time. I was trying to pull in everything, even if it was symbolic or encrypted. I was tapping into everything and putting it into what I could see myself in an obscure symbolic way if I were to look into the choppy surface of ocean surface. Like, you don't really see your perfect reflection, but you know that you could see, if you look closely enough, different features shine through. But now that this space was enveloped, this piece of art itself was a vessel. This was the ship. This process through these 2 years to make this was my means of travel. Art has always been my means of travel. So me surrounding this symbolic drawn ship with this process that symbolizes water is a microcosm of the edge of this piece being the edge of the ship, the boundaries of my vessel, and then the space that surrounds its boundaries are that same reflective, torn apart, choppy surface that is the universe we all interact in, is vast like the ocean in comparison to our individual selves. So once I had this ocean, also I as a reverse action to be reciprocal, I either gave these away or left them in places where I made memories while I was in Colorado for different people to find. Select few I gave them to because they were important people. And I think a couple of them I auctioned, because auctioning was also a way where I interacted with my community. So all of these pieces are out in the world somewhere. Somewhere you will find this piece. I don't know where it is, but I don't know where any molecule of water that I saw at any given time is at any other given moment. But I know it's there. I know it surrounds me. It might look like empty space, but it's full of reality, for lack of a better word. And this is still just the idea, the interpretation of that reality. So, yeah, as I was saying, once I finished the ocean, for the most part, I decided that I was ready to start making sense of the ship, the actual vessel, my body. And it was confusing. I'd never drawn a ship before. I didn't know what shape I would be. I didn't think I would be so structured. So I had to do some exploring. I wanted to look at all sorts of ships. I wanted to, like anyone else would, try to understand themselves, they can kind of compare themselves to others and look for familiar traits or resonant traits where they're like, oh, that's totally me. Oh, I feel that. Like that's what's up. Like I could totally see myself, blah blah blah. And I had to kind of think of that as a ship. Like if I were a ship, what kind of ship would I be? And I found in this rabbit hole of a stumbling internet fiasco, I found this Chinese trading ship from like the 1800s or something. Just a random blip in time. I saw this ship and I'm like, that's me. That's me. So I, on the side, drew out the general shape minus some of the details. And with a general idea, I just started drawing in how I wanted the boundaries to be, because my boundaries aren't so rigid. They're like liquid. They're ever-changing. They're not rigid. They're not straight lines. I am mentally curvaceous. My boundaries, the reason I have trouble seeing my boundaries is because they are constantly changing, and on different facets of my boundaries there's a different distance from myself. And it was strange to try to produce that visually, that boundary, but doing so helped me understand the abstraction in myself, like how and why it's been so difficult to recognize myself. I am not so easily recognizable, and I never thought I would see myself in a ship, nonetheless a Chinese trading ship. So that in itself was reflective on how obscure I am, or I feel like I am, to see or be seen or be understood. It's going to be as random as finding this ship and recognizing it and being like, wow, who would have guessed? Not me. I had to see it to believe it. So yeah, I built this ship and started filling it with a other exploration that I was doing as a way of trying to build another 3D style that could help me carry not only the physical things, my wallet, my phone, my keys, and random pocket vibes, but these ideas that I can keep with me. And it came out in the shape of these bags, these knapsacks, these backpacks. And I would take, at the time, different shirts that I'd find at thrift stores, or blankets or pants, and I would cut and re-seam them, almost like I took the edges of the idea, cut them, and then re-seam them into place. And then within those seams, I built a volume that could hold and encase other things. So everything that you see within the floorboard of this ship, the surface in which something can be held, is a bag that I made with different patterns. Like you could see a button right here. They're all different bags. And those bags I would auction on my Instagram, and they are out in the world holding things. And that's one of the greatest honors of my life, knowing that I made something that others can use to hold. And I feel like I try to be that as an artist, as a creative. I try to make things that can help people hold something, literal or symbolic. It's almost like when I make a piece of art, it's my dream for someone to stumble upon that art and recognize something of theirs in it and be like, oh, this is holding this thought and emotion that I've had. It's been holding it, and let me reach in with my intellect and pull that thing back out, observe it, play with it, and then put it back until I'm ready to grab it again, like my phone, my wallet, my keys. And many of those things we lose, the things that I would put in these bags. So a lot of the thoughts and emotions that we have that I want others to recognize in my art are things that I recognize other people lose daily. So, yeah, bags on bags on bags on bags. And then the helm of this ship are built out of drawings that I did of ink brush paintings that I would do on wooden boxes that I either built or repurposed from drawers or birdhouses or anything like that. But I would also build my own boxes. So all of these shapes that we see that can look like scenes of people, of scenarios, of landscapes, of animals, of even cave paintings, they're all these representations, these decontextualized representations of these abstract paintings that I would do on these surfaces that would wrap around. They wouldn't be one angle. You had to get around it on all angles to understand the object that you were seeing. And even with that perspective, you needed to keep looking in order to even begin to truly understand what it was that you were seeing. And I felt like that vessel, the idea of yourself, the body that would go anywhere, is just as obscure, it's just as necessary to get the full perspective of yourself and another in order to understand what it is you hold at any given moment that you're interacting with yourself or another, physically or emotionally or creatively or spiritually. Like you could even see here the little doors to the birdhouses, like the edges of the house with the ceiling. So this whole ship is built out of birdhouses, drawers, boxes, which are all things that hold valuables, and then bags, backpacks, knapsacks, pouches, which are all things that hold valuables, but are valuable in and of themselves. Like the vessel is very valuable, and without the vessel, you'd be juggling all those things and dropping them every which way. And it's important to construct your vessel or reconstruct your vessel in ways that hold what you value effectively, efficiently. I also had these two boxes that I built and drew as treasure chests, because I never actually put anything in the boxes. What I was putting in the boxes were ideas. Anyone else would look at these boxes and think, oh, they're empty. But to me, they're so full. They're jam-packed. There's probably no room for anything. And sometimes I feel like that as a person. Like, I am full of these ideas, and when someone wants to enter my life, I'm like, oh my God, let me rearrange. I need to make space for you. I don't have space. Just like, walk around me. Interact with me. Don't step inside, because unless you love a cluttered space full of colors and shapes and overlaps and layers, you're gonna feel overwhelmed as well, and this is going to end badly. But yeah, bags and boxes. See, this was another box that I built. Like, I built the ceiling to open, over top of a drawer that I repurposed and then made a little sail. So when I would open the box, it was a representation of this vessel that I could set sail with, and the sail would catch these ideas that I had that would be ephemeral like the wind, and then hit the sail and then help the box move symbolically, not literally. And I would go to places in Colorado and set it out so that I can catch some wind as some weird symbolic intent for myself. Like, you see this catching the wind, you catch the wind too. When you have these ideas, let them hit something. When they hit something that is physical and real, let that process take you somewhere further. And this is actually another box that I made for it was my base box, and I still use it to hold my tools for the clay work that I do to this day. I made this drawing 4 years ago, believe it or not. But this was a box that I built entirely and painted. And it holds valuable tools that are a huge part of my creative process that takes me to places totally resonant. So this is probably the most accurate vessel that would resemble this larger space, this larger ship. And that being said, all of these clay works, they're very experimental. I really didn't know what exactly I wanted out of it. I just knew that it was an outlet, a new outlet in which I could take my 2D observational skills and apply it into a 3D form that can build a real thing that could have a lot more potential to making objects than my 2D boundaries. I was stuck on this page and I wanted to get off. I wanted to step off the page, and this was my way. But I started doing more clay work, which is actually what builds the stems for the sails to be rigged up against. These sails were creative processes that caught the best of my ideas, and I felt like I was really going somewhere through clay with the drawn, the two-dimensional thoughts that were the initial wind, and that wind would hit these sails, this clay process, and the clay process was my means of taking my body of work to new realms. And all of these chunks are coins that were sliced, center slices of each milli that I had done in a way that it really showed me that I was going somewhere within the actual clay process, not in general, but my travel and the distance I made in progressing in this style was proof of the distance that I was going emotionally, creatively, and physically as I was moving throughout these processes. It's very active, a lot of motion, a lot of activity, a lot of things that I needed to get in order to make this happen. It's less still than drawing. Drawing, you kind of stay in one place and reflect and draw and reflect and draw and reflect and draw. But this was very active. You break a serious sweat, and it's a massive exercise. So I'm not going to go too deep into why each piece is where it is. There is a relationship to what is here, what's here versus what's there versus what's there. And then these pieces at the top, which are commentary on Yoni Gen energy, this creative, procreative force. And also in the sails, my Jolly Roger were my pencils, one in each hand, which was the things that brought me here. My allegiance was to the pencil, and then the pencils were the bones of this idea that I have about our solar system, the direct environment that we interact with, that is our Earth, our moon, our sun, and these two dualistic vantage points from one side to the other that face each other. You should look at something from one side, that means you should always look at it from the opposing side to have balance, this idea of balance through perception. I'm not saying it's a binary world, but that if you look at one thing, look at it from the other side so that you understand it on a whole. And then the vessel in which you communicate that relationship with what you observe. This was an idea that I had that was like, it was symbols that were around me that I combined into one that I felt at the time symbolized my relationship with the things that I was interacting with and why I was interacting with it as such. And it was the @ symbol, the hashtag symbol. So the hashtag was subject in social media, the @ was contact in social media, and the apostrophes, the quotes were content. So altogether, it was this shareable experience with the intent of interacting with others and sharing ideas. And that was in between all of this. This entire experience was what I wanted to share. So that's why that symbol's there. I was printing it on apparel too at the time. So also, this vantage point, the two vantage points here on one side of the sail is everything. This concept of everything, filling it to the brim. But on the other side of that sail is absolutely nothing. Like, you need both. You can't fit everything into a space of everything. The only place where everything will fit is into a space with nothing. So that was this relationship. And also, you might want, just from this vantage point, now that I'm thinking, you might want extra space. So there's two spaces of nothing and one space of everything. It's like sandwiched in nothing. So you have extra space to breathe. But at the very least, you want to balance that. But also, as you see these designs, from each one, I was making a figure that resembles, their head resembles this symbol. And this symbol, this character, the symbol that came from a character is a character that I would draw in graphic novels when I was in elementary school into 6th grade. In middle school, it was a character that was how I perceived this imaginary friend who would interact in my mental space, like this critter that would roam and create visuals through my thoughts. And his name was Pi, P-I, because I was always good and interested in math, and pi was one of the most intriguing symbols that we learned about, in circumference and diameters and what is it? I don't know, is it quadratic functions? But the point is pi was so applicable, but also irrational and never-ending. How could you use something that was infinite? But you could use infinity to define things that might seem obscure without it in context. I like that idea. So pi was what I identified, this relationship that I had with myself, really, in hindsight, my conscious, I guess I named my conscious Pi. And to give the vessel a shape. Like this was the idea, but I wanted to give that idea. Like this was my most accurate portrait probably since this one, because it spoke to my most childish or innocent, better yet, my most innocent portrayal of myself. And I wanted to give that a body through this exploration into clay. And with all these images, these intentions, I built a body that would hold this head up. So behind this ship, where it's going to dock into this village of awareness, conscientiousness, you find all these original characters that were figures that I built, totems that were, totems that would stand for something, give me a set of limbs and a core to stand upon or rest my head on, rest my head on my shoulders. And I remember these were the 4 horsemen of the Peicopolis, or Apocalypse. It was Peicopolis or Apocalypse. And they were a defining moment where I'm like, oh shit, the world I was living has now ended, or is ending. These pies have arrived. The world that I knew of is ending as we speak, and a new world is going to replace it, or fill the space that was left. And then all of these other figures started to be born, and were standing for different periods of my life. I mentioned earlier in the stream a unbelievable moment I had with two strangers at a festival about a pie that was fishing with the little like fisherman hat, bucket hat, this, and a Bomberman figure, and this was the pie. And I was carrying that pie in this box, but it was open, and he was catching bass. That was the fish he was catching, bass, slapping the bass. Yeah. And also in the shore, where all of these figures are sitting or standing or interacting with one another, it's built out of drawings that I did of the pencil shavings. Like all of these, up until certain points, these are pencil shavings. They look kind of rectangular. Those are all pencil shavings, and I felt like my process was the shoreline where I could step upon and allow myself to enter a new space. But it wasn't the pencil exactly itself, but the entire process, the pencil and the intent to sharpen. And I have all of my shavings to this day. I keep them. Everything that I draw, I keep the shavings because I feel like I want to have a cool representation of all this history, almost like it's my ashes, my urn. And each pilot is what they're called, like the pilots. The pilot of this ship. It was my journey pilot, and the companion, the stimulating pilot, and even their pilots, the companion pilots. They all symbolize an idea that I wanted to have. I wanted to be grounded in. I wanted to have my feet on the ground with any idea that I had. I wanted to find stability with any idea, no matter how obscure, how abstract. So when I would create these millies and form them into these figures and bake them and polish them, I was almost praying, for lack of a better word, towards honing in complete awareness of these intentions that I had. And the rocky surface that they're all sitting upon here, past the shoreline, most of it are clay reflections that I did, or clay coins. Like you see, these are reflected, like there's a center line. It's a pendant that I made where I took the remnants of a process, morphed them, sliced them, merged them, like molded them, pierced them, gauged them, and baked them and polished them. And I felt like that process it reflected like the process of the mountains, the landscape that we live on. It goes through that kind of deconstruction and reconstruction all the time. And we kind of sit upon this constantly tessellating surface, for better or for worse. There's also another vessel that I made that held a knife that I actually lost moving back to Florida, but I still have the box. And even this pie is holding this pencil, almost like he's, or she, this is a feminine character, she's holding the pencil probably for this character as like an offering, a peace offering, because they are arriving at this space. The vessel is arriving at the portal, and their family of thoughts, their family of companionship, their family of whatever it needs to be to prepare you for the next step is there to support them as a village. What is it? It takes a village. What is that? Is that how it's said? But yeah. Oh, there's also these lighthouses. You can barely see it, but there's a bottom of a bottle that I wrapped in clay. I was just finding all of these cool ways to incorporate this new process, to represent this idea of vesseling. I was doing the work, but I was also doing the work. Like I was doing a lot of yoga and exercise because I was still recovering from a car accident. And I also broke my shoulder in the middle of this piece, so I couldn't even finish it for, I think, a few months. And I shouldn't have drawn because I have to rest so much weight on my arm. But I couldn't say no. But I also regret not saying no. And that in itself, in hindsight, taught me a lot about letting go of something for the sake of the vessel. Even if what you're letting go of benefits your awareness of that vessel, take care of the vessel so that the next time you are attaining awareness of it, you're not realizing how much pain you're in. Yeah, the piers, pencils, but you can also see my 137s, because the 137 in my life was a sign that I was on the right path, that I was making the right choices, that I was preparing to be here in the moment. As oxymoronic as that sounds, like something that I was doing in that moment was in preparation for being more there for it. And always, every time I drew, I felt like I was resetting myself. Like, you have to be entirely there. You have to be completely focused on what you're doing. And then when you finish something, you carry that focus into the next things that you do. It's why I kind of maintain that practice. Less so for impressing or addressing anything specific, but just to restructure the chaos that my mind can find itself in. Also, the pier is croppings of different paintings that I had done. I laid them down and took a picture and drew them at an obscure angle, because painting was also an important part of my process where I could find my footing coming from these abstract ideas. It's like you can't walk on water. Like, you need to build something where you can find your footing. And painting in that way helped me find the control over the brush and awareness of colors, as difficult as that has always been for me, and balance and all these ideas that were important for me to realize physically, but also mentally. They were entwined. There's more lighthouses, or almost Smurf houses, where you can see more millies that repeat. It's like you can learn the same lesson over and over and over and over again until it finally clicks. I felt like my millie style referred to that concept a lot, that repetition in order to accomplish awareness, that practice. Instead of it being joints or buds, these were things that I was responsible for. And that's also an important thing to take note of. There's no nug in this. There's no reference of bud or joints or really pipes or anything of that nature. It's all art. I finally saw myself for the art, the body of work. I was not the influence. Me realizing my influence, like me as an influence, was activating. I didn't need to associate myself with that culture anymore. I could slowly separate myself from that and find my trigger and high in creation. That was where I was going to find my most resonant community in creatives. And since this piece, I've always done my best to maintain relationships with the creatives I've interacted with, and any new ones that come in, I learn from any mistake I made in the past, and I do my best, my very best, to not destroy it, especially through intimacy or things like that. And if intimacy is involved, I am extra careful with creatives that I stumble upon. So yeah, these pilots were super important for me. It's also important to take a mental note of how strenuous it was to find a system in the oven to allow them to stand on their own without melting and falling over and destroying themselves. That says a lot to the difficulty involved in building strength in your own physical body, and how much weight we can all put on ourselves, and how that can tip us over and destroy us and mark us and burn us and just distort us. So the fact that these are all standing tall shows an accomplishment. Each one is an accomplishment that I wanted to draw and take note of and remember as being part of this access point to myself and the future that I held. I wouldn't have a future without this ability to hold myself up in these tough positions through my creative process. My creative process is the mechanism that I use to keep my body strong, balanced, aware of itself. And also, you see behind this portal is a big party where all of these pies are in this massive crowd where you can barely recognize them. You can see there's one that I know. You won't be able to see it, but I know it for what it is. All of this could be seen as so many things that aren't even there, which is, it's like you look at this and you're looking at the surface of water. This is just the way my wind hits the water and creates the chop. But I saw my reflection in this, so that's why I can point these things out. But I see this domo pie, which I used this domo, the domo samurai millie that I pulled and sliced to make him kind of like how this pipe is made with all the same millies. I made this guy out of the domo, and the domo is carrying a smaller domo and is almost trying to throw the domo like a paper airplane. Like, I'm the pilot, that drew the pilot, that's throwing the pilot, but I am that pilot throwing this paper airplane pilot into the world, into the crowd. It's like a microcosm. Like it's a constant microcosm. Like there are many layers where you zoom in and it's the same thing, but at a different scale. But it's all saying the same thing. But they're all at this concert where they're all there to attend this perfectly balanced pilot, this epitome of what I wanted to accomplish as a creative, as an artist. And they're bordered in these subwoofers, but the subwoofers are all just circles. They're bordered in pi. And in the screen, the projection screen, we see this big hippo. And I use that because of the play on words with the hippocampus, the realm in your brain, the part of your brain that is responsible for memories, and how this is my hippocampus that is holding all of these memories that I'm trying to find a place for. Like this is like I'm reverting to my hippocampus as we speak, looking at a physical hippocampus that I drew out. So that might be why it's so easy for me to refer, because I pulled out a hippocampus mind map for me to like bounce off of. And also you'll see 137s all over. They are my symbol. They're my sign. And they're also upside down, backwards. Like no matter how I see it, I recognize it. It can be in any which way and I recognize it. And there's also the pi in inversion. Pi 137, pi 137, and that is pi let. Let in leet speak, 1337 speak, is L-E-T. P or pi, P-I, L-E-T, pilot. It's not a pilot that's meant to fly. It's a pilot that's meant to discover and rediscover themselves, which takes a bird's eye view of all that you are. There's a lot of things I'm going to have to, glide over, but I think I'm getting to like the vast majority of all this. Also, like this ocean where I drew the drawings that surrounded me, the reflections in the windows where you would see the water being reflected upon through the reflection of a glass window. In the reflections of the ocean, I found concrete ideas, archetypal representations of myself. So in each window reflection, you see a drawing that we have gone over in the series, A Journey Through PEI. So all these windows are a progression from one to the next of how I got to this point. Like the pacifier, puff, the struggle, the metamorph is us, shade, where it all stems, a higher self. And they're all built out of these obscure shapes that I built the frames out of the same way that I would paint the shapes in my abstract paintings on the birdhouses, on the boxes. Yeah. Also, this vessel, at the tip of the vessel, there's this eye splashing in the ocean, looking very closely, and it's kind of crying. Its tear is this trail where you can find these reflective surfaces, because I feel like art has been a very important part of recovering from grief or processing anxiety or sadness or frustration, which in many cases can be seen through tears, shedding tears. So each piece is almost like a tear that I shed. And also, behind all of this, behind everything, is this pair of hands that are gently pushing the boat forward, pushing this intent forward. And the hand is built out of all of these hands that are different captures of that flow that I just displayed. A flow that is an honest expression of how flowy my thoughts are and how there is a connection, but it seems to be madness, but there is a method to that madness, and altogether there is this effort to push this idea forward. And these two hands are the creative force, the drive to create, represented, the hand of hands that were responsible for creating this body of work. It's my access point, but let's say if your body of work is dance, it would be all these positions of your dance and how that's related to your emotions and expression and all that. To me, I have a very close relationship with my phalanges as an access point, gates of my portal to help me access these representations of myself. They say hands are the most difficult thing to draw, but have you ever drawn your hands made of hands? Oh, final thing to show scale. It's something you probably have noticed, maybe didn't notice, and also there's a lot of hidden things in this piece that I would hope that you take your own time to explore on my website where you can zoom in. There is a lot to explore, but I'm trying to cover at least the surface layer of what I was thinking at the time. But this is my final note before I go. To set a stage for what this is, the expanse that it could be seen as, how your mind explores all of this. I made these two companions that just crossed this rainbow, and the rainbow is actually a pull of clay that you would slice down that rainbow and get all the images that you see, like this symbol right here, which is actually a Native American symbol for protection from the storm. But they're walking towards this portal, which is actually a vulva, a happy trail to a set of a vulva, and they walked, which is more than a symbol for creation, the source of the creation as we know it. But they walked all the way around. You see, all the way around, there's this border of the self, this vessel, these footsteps. And they just kind of explore, go up these ziggurats, through the sundial, up and down these staircases, all the way around these borders, all the way around these pilots, observing all of these sights to see, like winding and whirling through what it takes to understand yourself on all these layers, so that they could finally arrive at this portal that they can fit themselves through. And this is that portal to me, where I found my salvation with art. No matter what struggle I'm going through, whether it be the art itself or not, art has always been and will always be my salvation, my access point, my form of travel. And regardless of whatever happens to me, if I need to access myself, it's through art. If you need to access a true understanding of me, it's through art. Art, creativity, self-expression is the portal. It could take you anywhere. So yeah. That being said, I think we covered a lot of ground here. I'm ready to start talking about the journey through the Peillustrations, where these pilots found their own story, where I started to invite people into my world with a less intimidating form. That is easier to spend a short amount of time to understand the general idea of each page that I render. And what has slowly but surely become a graphic novel that I am very excited to explore and grow through and with. I feel like I've come full circle, the full pie, and have reverted to my pie-based graphic novels, comic strips, but with a new layer of awareness and intent. And all these tools on my belt to create whatever I want, really. So, yeah, that being said, we can move on from the portal, move forward, and take a quick break from these very dense, probably nonsense to anyone that's new to this, even not new. We can move on to something more innocent, but still encrypted with these symbols. My next Peibi Playhouse episode. So, yeah, enjoy that next episode. They're getting more fun as we continue through the journey through Pi, as it should be. And, yeah, as always, have a great day, have a great night, and have a great time in general. Deuces. Huh? Aw, man, again? DMP, DMP, it's another day with DMP, DMP, he's made out of clay. DMP, DMP, the Dutch Master Peibi and friends. DMP, DMP, take the chance and play with DMP, DMP, he's here to stay. DMP, DMP, the Dutch Master Peibi and friends. You know, being human's are cool and all, but sometimes I just want to be a Peibi. I wish I was a Peibi. Yeah, pretty much number 7. It's just been a winning streak in there. Poor number 3. Blue? Number 7? Did you invite him over? Oh! I don't know. Prism didn't. You're gonna sleep all day. Bro. Number 3? Come in here. You're joking. Oh. Wow. Hey, dude. Yo. What's up? I'm number 3. Hey, my name's Meta. Cool. You wanna play Mortal Kombat?